Okay, so as I have tried repeatedly to remind you, warn you about, however you want to think about it, your final project is due this coming Monday. I am looking once again at the final project proposal, and I'm looking at the one for my US 1 course, but the points will remain effectively the same for those of you who are doing Civ 2 or any of my other courses. The outline for this, as you were given also in the syllabus, was that your proposal was due in week 4, that your list of preliminary sources was due in week 7, and while you need a minimum of 6 secondary sources, they cannot include the textbook or any of the secondary readings that I have assigned for you. If you're in US 1 or 2, this means the Lepore book. If you are in Civ 1 or 2, this means the Frankopan and Harari. You may use them, but they do not count for one of your 6 secondary sources. And you will already have seen this repeatedly if you listed them in either your preliminary list of sources or your annotated bibliography, which was due in week 10. All right. So, again, this is your list of what was going on with it. Your annotated bibliography, which I have already graded and returned to you, was worth 15% of your final grade. I expect to see most of those sources in your final paper, and I expect to see them used in the way that they're supposed to be used. All right, so for your final project, the big thing I want to get you to here is the actual grading rubric. And again, regardless of whether you are in Civ 1, Civ 2, US 1, US 2, Western 1, Western 2, any of the ones that I'm teaching, this is the same structure. The total for this is 20 points, right? So I've broken it down into specific categories. In your annotated bibliography, you should have submitted to me a preliminary introduction and thesis statement. And I encourage you to pay attention to any notes that I made. Most of the notes that I tend to make on this are that you need to narrow the scope of this thesis so that it can be argued and presented in the, surprisingly, you're going to say this is not true, but it is, in the surprisingly short amount of space you have to do it in. If you're writing a paper, it's at least 10 pages of text. That does not include your cover page. It does not include your notes. It does not include your bibliography at the end. It's 10 pages of text. If you are doing a video and you are using a PowerPoint presentation with it, that needs to be at least 5 minutes to do. So you need to be very sure that you have enough information to talk through whatever your topic is. All right, so 1 point is going to count for that thesis statement and the introduction, which needs to be a thesis. A good thesis statement is one that is, well, as it says here, states a clear thesis statement that establishes a central analytic position on the paper. This is called a position thesis or an argument thesis. You are going to prove something to me, and that thesis statement is what you plan to prove. That's a distinguished. Proficient is if you do it, but it's not. It could be more succinct or more clear or more specific. Basic is the C figure. The grade of a C is 0.75. Below expectations is 0.6. Non-performance is, of course, 0. I will be comparing your introduction and your thesis statement to what you submitted to me in your annotated bibliography. If I made comments about how it needed to be tighter and it's not, your grade's going to go down because I've already given you some preliminary hints about what to do with this. So, all right. The next category is the history of this issue from the 1400s through the end of the course. If you're in US 1, which is the one that I'm using, the end of the course is the 1870s, which means you can effectively skip over the 1870s to the present, but you still need to address it because your whole point was to come up with something happening today that you consider to be a central problem that has been a central problem and is one that you can trace through the period of time of the course. If you're in Civ 2, that means from the 1400s to the present. If you're in Civ 1, that would mean from the ancient civilizations up to effectively the 1500s, the early modern world, and then a skip over to the present. If you're in US 2, that effectively means something that starts after the Civil War and continues into the present. All right, this is a big chunk of the grade on this. It's going to require you to think about the history entirely. As I've tried to point out to most of you, I want to see a continuous history, one that goes on from literally doesn't skip over big periods of time. Like if you're doing it from the 1400s to the present, then you want to be sure to cover something from every century in the middle. Same thing applies if you're doing any of the modern courses. If you're doing an ancient course or an early Civ course, then it's going to be something that starts in the ancient civilizations and goes through all the time periods that we've talked about in the course, of which there are 4. Antiquity, classical, post-classical, early modern. All right. It is going to analyze how previous societies viewed this problem. This, too, is part of the history. While I have it listed here as historiography, which it is, how has this problem existed? How has it changed over time? Or how has the perception of it changed over time? This also fits into the history category, and it's worth 2 points, which means that the tracing of the history from the 1400s to the present, or the length of the course, including the historiography of it, is 7 points out of 20. So that is easily a third of the course. Who has benefited from the problem and who has suffered from it. This is 2 points. It also has to do with the history. It's not just a matter of today, but historically, who has suffered from it and who has benefited from it the most. That's another 2 points, which brings that history total to around 9 points, almost half the value of the grade. How do we view this issue today and what can be done about it? This is the contemporary part. If you're in a contemporary course, that makes sense. This is also where, if you presented to me why you wanted to choose this in your final project proposal, this is where you can use a contemporary primary source for it, which you submitted to me in that. It's also where you can use something from your annotated bibliography. But this is the present. Where do we stand on it today? Then you're going to provide a conclusion, and in that conclusion, you're going to restate your thesis, and you're going to demonstrate how you've proven it in broad general terms. For another 2 points, you're going to utilize 6 secondary sources, which means they have to be cited. They can't be mentioned in the work cited or merely mentioned in the work cited. They actually have to be used in some capacity. And once again, they cannot include the sources I've required in the course. These are things that you've gone out and found on your own, and hopefully you analyzed in your annotated bibliography. To get the 3 points for the primary sources, not only must you cite them in the project, but you must also discuss their bias. And we've been going over and above and on this for quite a while now, so you should understand what this means. This is part of what you should have taken from the annotated bibliography as well when you were discussing the bias of your primary sources. Well, here we are. 1 point, of course, is on syntax and mechanics. This means subject-verb agreement. This means no serious and egregious misspellings or typos or whatever. APA formatting, which means correct citation, is worth 2 points. And I will repeat, if there is no internal citation, there will be no grade, because this is a mandatory APA exercise. Citation is required, just as it is on all of your discussions, just as it is on all of your submissions to me. If there's no internal citation, your grade is a 0. All right, so this is the rubric. And again, one of the big reasons I wanted to go over this was to make sure that you understand 9 points of this is based in the history of this topic through the course, not just in the modern day, but through the course. And the course itself, if you chose something that you're trying to take back to antiquity and you're not in Civ 1, then you're wasting that space. It needs to be something that traces it through the history of the 1400s to the present. or through the end of the point, if you're in US 1, 1870s, then it can jump over the 1870s to effectively the 2000s. If you want to hit on some little stuff in there, that will help with your grade, but it will not replace the focus of the grade, which is on the period of the course itself. Okay, this is due, as I've mentioned before, next Monday. So it is time for you to get on this. With that in mind, I don't plan to have class today. I want you to watch this video and to consider all of the elements that you need in your project. I want you to consider all the things you need to have in your project, because you need to be really well set up on this. This is worth 20% of your grade. That is 2 letter grades. If you are looking to make an A, then this has to be an A. There's no way around that. If you're looking to make a C, you can play around with this a little bit, but if that's what your anticipation is, then I don't encourage you to do that, because there's no way to know if, well, I mean, there is a way to know at this point, but if you've not been keeping up with all the other work that you need, the 6 good grades on discussions and the 4 good grades on CTEs, a good grade on your annotated bibliography, then you need this to be a very, very good grade in order to boost up your overall grade to what you want it to be. So this is your big project. I will be available this afternoon. You may email me. If you want to meet with me, we can set up a Zoom talk and get together about that. But I'm going to warn you, at this point in time, you should have everything that you need in order to do this, because we've been through the proposal, we've been through the list of preliminary sources, we've been through the annotated bibliography, and I have talked about this ad nauseum, if you ask me, but, a lot. So by this point in time, you should have some working understanding of what we're doing. All right, with that in mind, go work on your final project. Get ahead on it. Make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure that you have all the components in it that you need, including that historiography part. How has this been viewed in the past? And that's a good place to use your primary sources. How do we view it today? And how has that changed? All right. Good luck. I will send out something to you on Thursday as well. I don't plan to go over the discussion and stuff from this past week, week 13, until after we get past the final project. So get on this, and if you have questions, email me.